Ever since the classic days of arcade gaming, developers have been working hard to attempt and make direct ports of their arcade hits for home consoles. In the late 80s and early 90s, this became easier as home console hardware increased in power. By the late 90s though, the entire scene had changed. With home console gaming a bigger industry than arcades, many developers instead made games for home consoles. The stalwarts of the arcade scene were still around though, Midway perhaps being one of the most prolific arcade game manufacturers of the time, often created an arcade game and then attempted to port it to consoles with varying success. In 1998, Atari had resurrected the Gauntlet franchise to bring the first new arcade release in 12 years from the series. It had achieved moderate acclaim, and keen to cash in on the rebirth of one of the all-time classic co-op games, work soon began to make home console versions of the game. The first home console version was indeed the N64 one. Landing on store shelves in late 1999, it was the perfect title to land on the console, which was built with multiplayer gaming in mind. What's interesting about Gauntlet Legends is that whilst all home console versions share the same title, they all have their own unique features, items, levels, and in the case of the Dreamcast version, a totally unique game engine. The story of the game goes something a little like this. An ancient mage summons Scorn, a powerful demon from the underworld. Scorn, being the all-powerful demon he is, breaks free from his shackles and kills the mage who summoned him. Now with his freedom, he seals the summoner's tower and takes control of the four realms. And with the fate of the world resting on your shoulders, it's up to you to venture into the four realms, do battle with hordes of evil beings to collect the runestones and activate the obelisks to have the total final confrontation with Scorn himself. In a true Dungeons & Dragons fashion, you have a choice of character classes to play as when tackling these dungeons. Firstly, you have the warrior class, who are great at hand-to-hand combat. They are the most powerful class, but they're also weak in magic and slow in comparison to the other classes. The archer class are great with long-range fighting, but when it comes to hand-to-hand they are weak, and so if playing with this class, you'll want to keep your enemies at a distance and take them down with pot shots. They're also one of the faster classes, so they come in handy when you need to dodge attacks or quickly run ahead to hit switches. The Valkyrie class is a jack of all trades and perhaps the most rounded class. Whilst they're equally good at hand-to-hand combat and range attacks, it's their armour which puts them ahead of the other classes. As this class upgrades quite quickly and easily, it's perhaps the best class for newcomers to the game. And finally you have the Wizard class. This class is weak in most forms of combat, but when it comes to spells and magic, this is by far the strongest class. They come in handy later in the game when you have huge rooms of enemies you need to clear out quickly. When you reach a level 100 with this character, their attacks are ridiculously powerful and out of balance with what the game can throw at you. In a nice addition, you can also choose a colour for your character, and there are also modifications to unlock. To get these, you need to find the secret bonus exits and collect tokens in the bonus stages. Now back in the mid-80s when the first Gauntlet hit arcades, the gameplay was simple and addictive. Hack and slash your way through various dungeons, hitting switches, finding secrets, and reaching the end point to move on to the next level. Nothing has really changed with the basic formula of the game, and so if you've enjoyed the original, then you'll feel right at home here. Not all of the levels take place in dungeons though, but the game sometimes ventures out into outdoor areas and the like. That's perhaps one of the game's strengths. Not only does each world feel unique, each level does too. And there are plenty of them. One level you could be raiding a castle, and the next you could be in an underground cave surrounded by snow and ice. The whole art design of the game is superb, and it generally feels as if you're entering a new world each time you play. What also impressed me was the sheer amount of different enemies. Sure, they all fall into the same categories, but mostly having unique enemies really helps to keep the game feeling fresh. As you clear one level, you'll be looking forward to moving on to the next one to see what new visual treats you'll get. The graphics do a good job too, just don't be expecting near arcade perfect visuals though. If we're honest though, we do know that the N64 was by no means powerful enough for that, but thankfully the basic look of the game remains intact. And you may have noticed that the expansion pack logo on the front of the box, Atari actually made a good use of this. Instead of just pumping all of the extra power into the resolution, the expansion pack also helps to keep the frame rate solid. This is especially impressive when you get later into the game and there are some moments where the screen can literally be filled with enemies, all moving and attacking you. When I was younger I used to play this co-op with my brother, and yes, the more characters you do add, the lower the frame rate will go, but you'll be having so much fun you'll most likely have your gameplay experience unchanged by this. Another slight dip from the arcade version is the level of animation. Again, to work around the power restraints, the characters have far less frames, but generally everything looks well. Thankfully though, the studio tried to keep some of the more memorable enemies intact, and so when you reach the various golem guardians or end of level bosses, things do look a lot more fluid. And speaking of the bosses, just as they should be, these are some of the most memorable battles in the game. The bosses are gigantic beings of pure fantasy, and when teaming up with friends they can take a great deal of time to take down. In a very cool twist, when playing the game you can also unlock legendary weapons that aid you in these boss battles. For example, if the Crimea is giving you a hard time and you're able to find a legendary weapon for that world hidden in the previous levels, instead of the battle just starting, you'll instead be treated to a cutscene where you'll use this weapon to weaken the boss from the get-go. It's an incredibly cool touch, and it really makes you want to explore every nook and cranny in the world to find as much as possible. The N64 version of the game is also the first one to feature Summoner's Store, where you can buy and sell items and power-ups. This is a great feature as throughout the game you'll amass a huge hoard of equipment, and not all of it will be useful for your gameplay style. So instead you can sell what you don't need, buy the gear you want, and it makes for a much more enjoyable experience. Once you have completed a level you're also able to re-enter it. This time though the number of spawn points will often have doubled, which gives the game a huge amount of replayability. The enemies become tougher, and with more and more of them on screen to battle through, it's almost like having a hardcore mode without this title. The sound too is one of the game's strengths. Using Factor 5's music's audio compression, the game actually contains a fair amount of decent sounding voice samples. Of course, Gauntlet wouldn't be complete without hearing the timeless Blue Warrior's About to Die line, but each level is introduced, and whilst you can tell it's heavily compressed, it's still great to have this on an N64 cartridge. The rest of the game's music is very fantasy inspired, and it contains a standard organ music and drum samples. If you play this with a good surround sound system, one thing you'll love is the amount of bass the game has. When playing I found it very satisfying to hear deep rumbles every time I smashed through a spawn point or unleashed a magic spell. There are some minor problems to the game however. Firstly, the camera can at times be a little bit tricky to get used to. It's known to throw itself all over the place, turning, twisting, zooming in and out, which can make you lose your sense of direction. There are also times when, due to the amount of on-screen action, there's moments of clipping and your character can get stuck for a moment or two. Again, these are minor gripes, and when the rest of the game is so fun to play, these really are easy to overlook. Perhaps the biggest problem with the game though is that whilst it's one of the funnest N64 games to play, no single player campaign can ever be as fun as having 3 other friends with you, all on the same screen battling away and fighting over loot to pick up. Whereas some arcade games take away the need to be standing in an arcade to get the full game experience, Gauntlet Legends perhaps works best in that way. Some of the most fun moments you can have are not when the game is offering you something, it's the discussions, arguments and fights that take place outside of the game content that really helps to make this title stand out. It's hard to review Gauntlet Legends without thinking about my experience of playing Diablo. When I first played Diablo II on PC, it was an awesome game, and like many people I spent countless hours of my life loot hunting and delving deeper into the world it contained. When Diablo III arrived, although the actual game didn't seem as fun, the online multiplayer aspect was superb, and just joining up with some friends online gave me the same experience I had when I first started playing Gauntlet Legends back in 1999. And that's one of the reasons why Gauntlet Legends is a game that will divide opinion. There are some people who really dislike this game and find the gameplay repetitive, the grinding aspect a chore, and will likely lose interest in it very quickly. But then there are others like myself and Vintage Video Game Geek who adore the fancy Dungeons and Dragons style gameplay and get a real kick out of trying to find all the secret items, pathways and gear. It's not for everyone, but if you can muster up 3 friends to play this through, it is perhaps one of the best multiplayer games on the console, up there with GoldenEye and Mario Kart 64. And that's why for today's topic of conversation, I want to know why you think the N64 didn't get a huge amount of co-op games. Sure, we had perhaps the best selection of multiplayer games, but when it comes to working with friends, the scene is entirely different. Do you think it's because of the rise in the deathmatch mode, or do you think that gamers just preferred the sense of competition rather than helping one another? So as always, let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And until next time.